It seems like another universe now. Every morning of that summer, I'd lumber out of Kurt's spare room and drive up along the peninsula in the Subaru Liberty. We'd swim at the front beach for a little while, drink a few coffees at Rick's on Rye, buy some oranges from the general store, and then swim again up the coast and dry out in the sun. There was no talking between us, no eye contact. When things got uncomfortable, we climbed up the little hill in Blairgowrie that Kurt had scouted maybe 5-6 times before, the one that looks over the beach, smoking leftover crumbs from the ounce we'd bought in St. Leonard's. I can still remember the weekend we picked it up, the 4 a.m. rise, the terrible walk to the station in the dark, the cozy V-line seat, the trip to Geelong, watching the landscape go by in a blur. Everything was fresh and tranquil, the kind of solitude I've been looking for, the kind that required slow days and lots of REM sleep. No more packing boxes and choking on dust, no more talk of nursing homes and Alzheimer's medication. I remember feeling like a hitchhiker when I got off the bus at St. Leonard's. I stood by the water at the side of the quiet road and lay out on the grass. I was dog-tired. There was no sight of any other land in the distance across the flat, empty expanse of water. No boats or clouds, and I thought the country was dead. Around 10 in the morning, Kurt picked me up off Murdoch Road and drove me back to the house. That night, we picked up the ounce and scrambled up to the pier. We fished and smoked together. And at that moment, the momentous sound of water came flooding over the edge, all the crazy white noise straying in every direction. We could see all the way up and down the rocky coast and the long pier behind us, the moon the colour of cold, porous silicon. Fond memories came of the beach from years before. Joyrides down Ocean Beach Road, stretching across the peninsula to the west, stops by some cheeseburger trailer in San Remo, random drives with my family in the station wagon with my arms crossed over the front headrest, my dad excited over some story of a cure, some hope for his mother. "I'm telling you," my dad said, looking through the rearview mirror at me and my brother. "I've heard some people just snap out of it." "What?" "Sometimes they'll just spark up again, and they'll remember everything. Everyone's names, where they are, how old they are, how to eat. It all comes back." "It's just a moment of clarity," my mum said as she shrugged and leant forward, trying to break the news. "Sometimes they'll just spring to life again. It's just something that happens. Always comes in the days before death." We turned onto the main street and my dad sat in silence. He looked defeated, and I knew that feeling was going to sit with him for a while. When we came back from Sorrento, only part of him returned, and he was broken and exhausted. Broken because everything was lost, because he no longer existed to his mother anymore. As I stood under the lamppost at the end of the pier, the thought of it lingered with me too, as if her spirit had chased me down, as if she was floating there over the water in front of me. Or maybe I was just high enough to believe it. After 2 or 3 hits, I got off the railing and swayed in the nightly breeze, and all around me was the sweet scent, the puffs of smoke like ghosts hovering above the foxholes scattered on the beach, a thin white line across the sky, the moon almost indistinguishable beyond the distant shops, save for a slither of light, the holes under the low shore teeming with water. When we got back to the house, everything was soft again and warm. Kurt shone a flashlight over the baggie of buds, and there were blocks of purple protruding from the green, as if it embodied every kind of poison. We sat on the balcony and drank the rest of the night, and watched some old DVDs, I can't remember what. There were dots of stars along the Far East shining over the pale dirt streets, like the ones in the Mark of Zorro, the night minted in layers of dark iris. The wind never let up for a moment. I couldn't take my eyes off the cherry tree on the distant trail. How long had it stood there for? 30, 40 years? There were too many drooping stems, each face obscured. The company of birds gave movement to the sky. Sounds of engines rebounded in the street. Every drink we were drifting further from who we were, the town drunk before I could legally drink. This place had not been somewhere to feel present at all, and Kurt looked in some ways like he wanted to die, like he wanted to feel nothing, not even this. Never in my life did I understand his absent face. Not after our time in school, not after every beach trip or midnight smoke. No. Kurt had always left me thinking. I guess I wanted to understand what he wanted. I wondered if he'd watch his acai dry up and shrink in his palm, if he'd notice himself standing up to exchange each bottle for another, if after every drink he'd hold it above his lips, waiting for the last drops to trickle down. I wish we'd both respected the consequences. Perhaps, I thought, once the drunkenness had waned, he'd have a moment of clarity too. closed my eyes, I envisioned my back against the passenger seat of Kurt's Subaru, pushing speed across the road at some ungodly hour at the edge of the peninsula, an empty expression at the wheel, his motive still unclear. I wondered this way about many people, about any stranger I'd ever paid attention to, about the freckled guy who winked at me on Ferndale. What was he thinking nowadays? What would my brother be thinking about now? What was he doing so far away? What was he thinking that night as he stepped across Camberwell Junction in the rain? As he closed his eyes and held his breath? As the taxi broke the red light and shattered his body across the windshield? As his vision went blank and he felt himself flat against the concrete, his limbs half hanging in the drain? Yeah, I wonder. He used to take me along the grass plains by the freeway turnoff when we were younger, and my grandparents still lived in Pakenham. They lived in a single-story house with a garage, identical to the home beside it and the home beside that, a bowl of pillow-sized blue marshmallows at the entrance. After dinner we'd ride out on our skateboards under the mauve sunset as our grandparents drank tea, all the way along the sad, flat roads until we'd hit the opening of the plain, the empty land stooping against the bridge. At the dip of the gully where the plains end are the reflections of water over the old quarry, abandoned years of extracted lime rock and saturated clay. Rain had washed it over. It always shocked me that my grandparents lived in this boring place. It would have been nice for my grandmother to raise her children somewhere forgiving, somewhere picturesque, where there were trees lined in the suburb, where people left out buckets of water for the neighborhood puppies, where you would slow your steps to prolong the experience. But there is no hope for that anymore. Her future must be more modest. That maybe within her deterioration there will shoot out from the depths of her memory an everlasting image of her children and her grandchildren. She will probably never see that image or recall it herself, and maybe somewhere inside her, she knows that too. Though it would have been beautiful for her to see some proof of our existence before she passed, and she would remember herself in a better light. One day in January, I went out with my dad and bought a tablet at JB Hi-Fi so we could play the recording of the funeral for my grandmother. We drew up a piece of paper with instructions on how to watch it, and she needed to watch it. There was no other proof or word of mouth good enough to articulate the death of her husband. We had to honor the memory with details. The supple piano, the hymns, my brother as pallbearer, my cousin's eulogy, and on every viewing the same emotions will arise in her, at least until she forgets who he is entirely. She'll continue to watch it with a blank stare, maybe when she's confused, maybe when she's lonely. I wasn't sure that this kind of reported essence was good enough in catching his spirit for her, but each time I see her sit hopelessly in front of the screen, her neck shaking, her eyes strained, one hand on her chest, the other on her lap, I'm always broken too. Not because she doesn't remember me or anyone else, because I know she doesn't, and not because it pains me to see her. But because she is a human being. She sits there,